Well, welcome to our next session. We are looking at relaxation techniques now. Now, truly, we've actually done a little bit of this already, but now we really transition into the most of what we do the rest of the semester is going to be looking at a variety of different relaxation techniques to see if one of them is going to fit within your tool chest, to see if it's something that just works for you and that you want to keep and retain um, in times of need. So, we're going to be looking at a wide variety of different options. There are even more options in your textbook. We're not looking at every chapter that's in there. So if you love music or you love art, as an example, we're not diving into those two chapters, but they certainly contain options that can be incredibly valuable rather. But we already have done some about breathing. We've looked at meditation. We're about to look at mindfulness. Autogenics and visualization and yoga and getting outside. And our next class together actually is going to look at humor, and hopefully that's going to turn out really good. But there's a number of different things that we can look at from the standpoint of relaxation techniques. It's really clear that relaxation techniques are something that's of primary interest to us. Um, our attention is being directed, and companies are continuously working to try and grab that attention and use that to fuel their own profits in some ways. So I want you to recognize that relaxation techniques are something that we're seeing a lot of publicity around, and not necessarily all of it is going to be information that you want to act upon. So when we look at what are really the truly most beneficial, most universally true and proven to be helpful practices, we've already looked at the top three. If you're really interested in managing your stress, the actions that you can take individually include making sure you're being active, making sure you're eating well, and making sure you're sleeping well. But incorporating other relaxation techniques can be really helpful as well. So, when we think about relaxation techniques, just first trying to identify what relaxation is from a traditional standpoint. To relax was a physics term, and it meant to make something less tense or less rigid. And we now apply that concept into stress management and use that term um, culturally to sort of talk about relieving a person from nervous tension. So it means generally to us that there's some kind of calming or lulling or pacifying type effect. It inherently has something that's just subjective to it, because your experience about what creates that nervousness or that anxiety is unique to you. And so might be some of the techniques or the value of certain techniques. So what looks relaxing to one person may not look relaxing to another person. And that's why we're going to experiment with a number of different ones. And I really just am hopeful that you will find yourself gravitating towards or being drawn to a few more that maybe were unfamiliar to you before this class. So if we are going to try to define relaxation from our standpoint within our class, we've spent a fair amount of time talking about the biology, about how your physical body responds to stress and what creates that condition, as well as how does your body evaluate it and then respond to it. So if we're going to talk about relaxation, then generally we can talk about that as being the opposite of that stress response. So language we've used in the past that I don't want you to forget would be moving to that parasympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system, taking over and moving us to de-escalate all of those stress responses that we saw when the sympathetic system took over. We've also talked about the evidence around a mind-body connection, and we know that there's a very strong mind-body connection. So relaxation techniques are really working to try and maximize or uh, I don't know what word I'm trying to think of. Try to rely on that connection between the mind's influence over the brain or over the body. Now, I've said that we're seeing lots and lots and lots of information about relaxation techniques popping up in popular media. We're also seeing incredible growth in relaxation research. But one of the things that I would bring up, and this picture is from a couple of years ago, so if you ran this search now, you would see that there's actually more than 43,000. But the number of randomized controlled trials, which is our best evidence from a scientific method standpoint, the number of that type of studies are actually still pretty low. They have not grown very much. So we're seeing over 43,000 studies dealing with relaxation techniques, but at the time I took this picture, there were only about 3,000 studies that were really using rigorous scientific method to try to establish the validity of the impact of that information. So again, just because something's published doesn't mean that it provides really good evidence. You really want to be thinking about the quality of the research or of the source, not just the quantity. So the design, the way that the research study is set up, the rigor and practices that it uses really has an influence on how trustworthy the results are. So how are we going to know whether something's trustworthy or not? Well, some of the most fundamental things that I think can help you make sure as you continue beyond your undergraduate degree, to just stay correctly informed rather than informed is to consider whether it's a peer-reviewed journal or not, or is it just something like a news outlet? Because if it's a media or news source, it's often really valuable to consider if they're trying to support a particular viewpoint or support a particular industry. I think we have seen, especially as we look into the political situation, how influenced media is in attempting to support certain narratives. While it's become really evident in political circles, I think it's also very true in other areas as well. So, if it's something if it's a topic, if it's an area that you're really thinking is going to influence your decision on whether to try it, to invest in it, to spend time, money, or effort on it, I would say see if you can find quality research on the topic. There's a checklist up here about some of the things that would really help you to uh, identify the higher quality research material. The first says, is the news source trustworthy? Your peer review articles and your professional associations are going to be a much better spot for that than your popular media spaces. How many people were actually in the study as the N, which means the number of individuals that were involved in the study. As that number grows, so does the strength of the ability to take information from that study and relate it to other people. If we only study two people, how much can we really transfer that information to 40,000 people or 2 million people? The bigger the N, the bigger the number of people studied, the more likely there is somebody who's more similar to you represented in there. And therefore, the more likely that whatever the results are more applicable to you. Um, what are they comparing the treatment or the intervention to? Were the results actually significant or not, meaning clinically significant or statistically significant? And how long did the results actually last? Just because they had a result that showed an impact doesn't mean that it was something that really had a long-term impact. So, as I'm sure you've already experienced before, news outlets can have inflammatory or attention-grabbing sort of statements. Here you can see one that says breakthrough as scientists create a new cowpox style virus that can kill every type of cancer. Well, I would say that they are not necessarily being authentic or true in that particular piece. So, why even be talking about research studies or how to interpret media information? It's important to recognize, I think, that there's so much information available out there about how insanely helpful different relaxation techniques are, but just because you can find a lot of information about it doesn't mean that that information is all true. It's really obvious to us that chronic stress is so common in the United States that tons and tons of people are going to be interested in trying to mediate that chronic stress, and therefore they're going to be looking for products or materials or programs that might help them. So that means there's going to be all kinds of people looking to try to provide that kind of thing, not necessarily authentically or not necessarily relaxation techniques that are going to, in fact, be impactful. So your ability to be more critical about those kinds of things and identify facts from myths as you continue on across the rest of your life is going to be important to me, and I hope important to you. So let's move into a slightly different space for just a moment. I do have an important reminder. We do have our promise score number 3 is going to be due on October 25th. So we're going to be working to take that probably within the next week or so. It's going to be the business as usual. You've gone through this twice already, so it's nothing that is a big assignment. It's just one I want you to be aware of that we're doing a check-in again, see where you're at from stress levels. We also have been working on sleep over the last couple of classes, and your sleep hygiene lab is going to be coming due. It also came with that extra credit opportunity. So if you want to pursue that extra credit opportunity, you'll see that the description for that online just says to print out the question prompts that I had for you, give me your answers to those things, and hand them in to me in class at some point. So that is what we're dealing with. This is inaccurate. Next class on Wednesday, we're not dealing with autogenics. We're actually going to go into humor. So that was a mistake on my part. I would, let's see, that Hebrews 4:16 says, let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace that we may receive mercy, find grace to help in time of need. I hope that that's what we find within relaxation techniques, that we find some of the spirit of Christ and the peacefulness of God, and that we find grace to help in times of needs. You have a task. You do not have an ed puzzle this week, so do not be looking for one or being trying to find one. That is not a responsibility. Instead, your accountability piece, we're going to experiment with a new way. And I would be happy to hear from you what you think of this new way, but I want to continue to try some different things. I have put up a number of different articles, 3 of them, in fact, and I've put you into small groups of 3 people. I have assigned to you to read one of those articles, and then, as you've read one of whichever article you were assigned, you're going to post your overview of that article to Padlet. And there's a link here that you can find in the slide deck, or you'll also find it on Canvas under this week's materials, and it'll say Monday's Padlet. Once you've posted your synopsis, your overview, your sharing out of what the article that you read had to say, since your other 2 team members aren't going to read the same article, then as they contribute what they read, I would like the 3 of you to continue a bit of a conversation through Padlet. I know it's asynchronous and it will not be, it's an asynchronous conversation, but I'd like you to work together to try and find commonalities, try and find common theme, try and see how the articles that you read support each other or where they find support within each other. I'd like you to sort of synthesize the 3 articles together through your comments in those spaces. And that is what I am hoping for from you. That looks like when you go to Padlet, it's going to look something like this. Let's see if I can figure out how to make this part go away. Your groups are going to look something like this. You'll be able to find your name. You'll be able to find that if your name is assigned to a particular article. And then as you want to respond, you are just going to click the plus piece. You then can type your name and your response, and you can add in pictures and hyperlinks and all kinds of other things. And I imagine Padlet is something that you're already somewhat familiar with, but if you are not, it is a relatively simple interface. When you want to add something, you hit the plus underneath the column that you are in. And you will also have the chance to be able to respond to people and do all kinds of stuff. So I hope that is helpful, and I hope that you find the conversation to be interesting. And that's all I have to say. So, having said that, let me find the end button, and we will be done for now. I will look forward to seeing you at our next session.